Hello and welcome to the Glasgow Polo Live show. Hi mate, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. My name is Andy Muir.
And I'm Scott MacArthur, and we're going to do some music, memories, and bloody mayhem if anything like last week's going to happen again, mate.
Good.
It was, what time was it?
What happened last week?
Sorry?
What happened last week?
Well, we ended up, I said to Samantha, I'd be downstairs about 2:30, 4:15. I think I ended up skiddling downstairs, wasn't I? Hi David, how you doing? So anyway, guys, how you doing? Nice to see you all. What have you been listening to this week, mate? Have you forgotten?
Irish bands.
What?
Yep, Irish bands. St. Patrick's Day this week.
Ugh. I've been listening to Crown Lands all week.
Yes, I've been listening.
Unbelievable. To if you haven't heard the right, Rush fans, Crown Lands, absolutely amazing. Maybe ask Tom about this later. I don't know if he's heard them yet, but they're absolutely brilliant. I've been doing my head in. I actually, what's the song called?
I can't remember.
Every week I say music, memories, and mayhem. It should be music and something that means not memories and mayhem. Unmemories or
music with memories.
Also, how you doing? Good to see you. Raymond's in as well. Hi, Raymond, how you doing? And Ian, how you doing?
Also been listening to God, I just forgot. Dirty Honey. That's what it is. Dirty Honey.
Yeah. Oh, they're quite good actually. I quite like them. Yeah,
they're quite cool. Good.
Yeah. Hi Cheryl, how you doing? Just a reminder for everybody in the Facebook group: if you want your name to appear on the screen, there's a little fix you've got to do. Here, I'll just stick it on the screen for you. It's actually at the top of the Facebook group, and if you hit that, put your name in. It's 3 clicks, and your name will appear in the chat. So if you've got a question for Tom Russell later on, you can have your name in the chat, guys. So that would be great. That'd be great if you could do that. So we've got quite big news this week, mate, haven't we?
We have.
What happened on the social? Let me just see if I can find this thing. It's around here somewhere.
So when you've got a question for Tom.
Oh, that's a bit weird. What are you doing there?
No,
right,
that was my fault. Sorry.
That might be generic, but I quite like it. How's the socials been this week, mate? What's been happening?
What about the show is this? Oh, yes. I remember. Professional, sorry.
Right. Explain to everybody where this guy lives in Sydney. He's still in his bed. Come on, wake up.
Okay, well, what happened this week was we got to over 9,000 members of our little group here.
Unbelievable.
Which was it's quite remarkable.
Alan McKinley, if you're there, Alan, welcome to the group. You were member 9,000.
Yes.
Absolutely unbelievable. How many active folk do we have this week?
Oh, 6,483 active members.
Unbelievable.
Yep. And yeah, it's good. It's really good. And it was quite it felt very odd. Not odd. It felt good to have all those people come and share their memories, or come and have a look at other people's memories and then share theirs.
Yeah. There's still been these new member. We need to have a name for it, don't we? We get these new members come in and they go, "Wow, it was amazing," and they'll go, "I was at this gig." It's brilliant.
It's good.
I love it. I think it's the best thing. I think it's the best thing.
Sometimes I go, "Oh, you were at that gig and that gig? What?"
Yeah.
And then they'll explain, "Oh, my girlfriend took me." It's always like, so it's either my girlfriend at the time or my wife now. It's like
there was
it was like the gig was the deal breaker.
There was one of the guys, Graham Anderson, said it was like life in 30 meters. You could go to a gig, have fish and chips, and then get married next door. I thought that was quite good.
Where would you get married?
I've no idea. That's what he said. But umpteen folk then said, but Mr. Chips, the fish and chips were pish. So I don't remember ever having them out of there.
I don't think I ever had them out of there. But yeah, I could imagine. I think every time I walked past it was too busy.
Aye.
There's no point in waiting there to get a face full of vinegar.
Yeah. They must have made a fortune. They must have made a fortune.
Yeah. Did you hear that about someone? I think someone before said there was a little back way from the Apollo into Mr. Chips.
Aye, I heard that. There's been I mean, this is like the Loch Ness Monster, this. I mean, it's like there's like all these tunnels under the Apollo going to all these different places. There's probably was a direct beer pipe from the Burns House into the Apollo so the bouncers could get a drink. That'll be the next. We should just start rumours. That's what we should do.
Yeah.
Just so anyway, let's have a quick look at the chat, mate, before we get Tom on.
Okay.
What's happening here? A wee milestone. Yeah, thank you. I mean, James, it's magic. We do you know, 17 years, believe it or not now, nearly 18 years since we started the website, which is quite ridiculous. And I know, Tom, you're watching here. You can imagine, I could never imagine that was 18 years ago that we started that. But the thing that's been extra good about it is that because of this carry on with the virus, the activity on the site has just been enormous, and it's terrific. We just love it, and we're getting quite a few folk now on YouTube. We've got a population on Twitch, and Andy, I haven't told you this. There's half a dozen regulars on Twitch, which is a kids channel, so it's mainly for gamers. So, I think that might be young James here that's been encouraging them right enough. But so it's so got Barry. Hiya, how you doing? From the east, the far east of Edinburgh, mate. Thanks for coming on. And is that Mr. Chips before the TV show? Oh, Tom, you're gonna love this guy. He asks 100 questions every night. I remember. Do you remember Chips?
Yes.
Remember it? I remember it.
Yes.
Yeah. I have some news also regarding that book. We want you in. Oh, right. Okay. Well, we'll talk about that on the Zoom call later. I think we've probably not got time to. And here's a Facebook user. There's the where is it? There you go. There we go. The Chips were pish. Yeah, I've heard that for quite a lot of folk. Anyway, I think we should move on, mate. So tonight we've got a special guest, and we're absolutely delighted that we've got Tom Russell on the show. Now, unless you've been living under a rock for the last 30 or God, how long? Maybe 30, 40 years. I think it could be 40 years.
Well, I'm going to ask him a question about that.
Oh yeah, all right, okay. I'll not say anything else then. But unless you've been living under a rock, you will know who Tom Russell is. But if you don't know who Tom Russell is, Tom was a DJ with Radio Clyde, and to be quite honest, he just formed such a part of our young lives. He was like, we all called him Uncle Tom, so I know he doesn't mind that. I was calling him Godfather rather than what was I calling him? Grandfather, grandfather of rock. And I thought, oh shit. Anyway, without anything further, Tom, I'm going to switch your camera on. I know. Hiya, Tom.
I like that grandfather of rock. The ring to it. I like that.
Oh God. I was so embarrassed because it was, when you get that auto correct, right? I was like, and I'd cut and paste it all over all these different streams.
Yes.
So, yeah, I know. Anyway, welcome to the show, Tom. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you,
welcome,
Scott, and thank you very much for asking me. It's a pleasure.
Could you just stand up, Tom, a little? Maybe move up a wee bit, Tom, and see your T-shirt.
Oh
yes.
We're all doing that tonight, aren't we? Look, there you go.
Well,
excellent.
I felt I had to join in,
Oh yeah.
I've had this one on for years, but I managed to find it in the bottom of the drawer. So,
that was a good night that night.
That was a good night.
At the Armadillo, it was amazing. I remember when Tommy McGrory, who put it on, the chap from Paisley, who ran Loud and Proud, he phoned me up, and I hadn't met him before. He just phoned me up out of the blue and says, hello, my name's Tommy, can I come in and have a chat with you? At that time, I was no longer in Clyde, I was on Rock Radio. And I said, no problem. So Tommy came in to the radio station after I'd finished my show and sat down for a coffee, and he says, I'm a big fan of the Apollo, and I'm thinking about putting on a show. I've taken a lot of people off the streets in Paisley, and I've taught some of them guitar and some of them how to dance, some to sing, some to play drums. And we've picked out a few of them that are quite good in their instruments, and we're going to put on a show. And I wonder if you could give it a wee plug on Rock Radio. I said, aye, of course, no problem. I'm delighted. Where are you going to put it on? And I'm thinking it's going to be in a pub in Paisley or something. And he says, oh, we're going to put it on. We've hired the Armadillo in Glasgow. And we've booked it for a week. Bloody Armadillo holds 3,000 people. But he did, and he put it on. And I think the first 2 or 3 nights, it was about half full. But then the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it was just about sold out. And it was an amazing show that he put on. It was terrific. And that's what this T-shirt's from.
Yeah.
I was there.
We had Tommy on the show. We had Tommy on the show about, I don't know, 6 or 7 shows ago. Yeah. And it was magic. It was great to see him, and he's such a nice man.
Lovely
and
man.
The work he does,
Lovely
Tom,
man.
it's just amazing, the work he does with those kids. He's a top man. Yeah. So anyway, Andy, we've got some questions for Tom, haven't we?
Yes.
What are we going to ask him?
Don't make them too hard, Andy. Not too hard.
It's quite late at night.
My memory's not as good as it was.
What's x squared plus y squared? No. No, I was going to say, like, it's you've been doing this for 40 years, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. That's all I was going to say. 40 years.
I think it was 1980 or 81. I got the call from Richard Park at Radio Clyde to say I'd met Richard a few times. I had a couple of record shops at the time, and I'd met Richard at what could loosely be described as piss-ups, record company freebies. But back in those days, record companies used to invite lots of people along to maybe hear a new album from somebody or a new single, and the big attraction was they'd put on free drink and a free meal. So you would shut the record shop at 5:30 and you'd go along to the Albany Hotel in Glasgow, and you'd get pished, and you'd have your tea and listen to a new record by somebody other, and that was fine. And record companies, they would invite people from radio stations, from television, Scottish Television, BBC, the newspapers, Daily Record, Evening Times, etc. And I used to get invited because I had record shops, and I would meet Richard Park at these things, and I would say to Richard Park, "You're the boss at Radio Clyde, aren't you?" He says, "Aye." And I would say, "Well, why do you never play any rock music?" And Richard would say, nobody wants to hear rock music during the day on the radio. That's ridiculous. I said, "But Richard, I've got record shops, and I sell probably as much, if not more, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, AC/DC, Rush, etc., than I do the stuff you're playing on the radio, Anna Ross, and all the sort of pop, middle of the road and pop stuff of the day." But he wouldn't have it. And we used to, over a few beers, have a good-humoured, mild argument about this. And then one day, totally out of the blue, phone went in my shop. "Richard Park here, Tom. I've been thinking about what you've been saying. Do you want to come in for a wee chat?"
Excellent.
Aye, okay. So I went in for a wee chat, and Richard says, "I think I'm going to give you a wee show to do on Radio Clyde on a Friday night, 2 hours, and you can play all this obscure, weird rock stuff that you keep talking about. I'll let you do it for 6 weeks, and I'll pay you." And I think it was £10 a show. I got for doing it. I was delighted, and I went in for 6 weeks, and on the 6th week, nobody said anything like, "See you next week," or, "Thank you very much, good night." There was nothing said. So I thought, well, what am I going to do here? Will I phone him up and ask him if I can keep doing it? And I thought, no, I'll just go back in. So I just went in week 7. There was nobody else there, so I did my show. Week 8, week 9, week 10. And after 22 years, I was still bloody doing it.
I hope you weren't getting paid £10 a show, though.
No.
I think it went up to 15 towards the end.
Oh, 50% rise, Tom. Can't complain about
that. 50%.
Can we ask you? We've got this thing that we do every week, Tom, and some of the guys who tune in, we have an after show Zoom party where we all have a drink and a chat, and there's a lot of the guys saying this is really important because some of us are not getting any younger. And what we've started to do is we've started to get folk to record, video of their big memory at the Glasgow Apollo. Would you mind doing that for us if we just play a wee stinger before it, because I'll give you a minute to think about it as well. But what's your biggest memory of being at the Apollo? And we can just have a chat about it, and I'll play this little stinger, mate, and then we'll have a chat about it. So what's your biggest memory of the Apollo?
I had some fabulous nights at the Apollo.
Yeah.
Fantastic nights. And when you threw this one at me, your biggest memory, it's like saying what's your favourite band or what's your favourite album. It's so difficult to just pick one. So I'm going to cheat and try and slip two in. Can I get away with that?
Absolutely. Just because it's you.
The first one, I have no idea what year it would be. Absolutely no idea. But Elton John was at his peak. It was around about the time of Yellow Brick Road and the Captain Fantastic album. And Elton John announced a tour, UK tour, and he was playing the Apollo. And I tried to get a ticket. There was no freebies from the record companies. You had to buy a ticket. And I tried to get a ticket or a pair of tickets, and it was sold out. And then after a couple of days, it came up in the news that Elton John had added a second performance on the same night. And the tickets were going on sale the next day. So I managed to get one ticket for the second performance. I went along, and I think it was about 11 o'clock at night the show started. And he was on until about 1 a.m, half 1 a.m. And it was fantastic. It was an absolutely brilliant show that he put on. Right. And then many years later, I think it would be probably in the late 90s or maybe the early noughties, I had the pleasure of interviewing Elton John down in London in a posh hotel. And he was lovely to talk to, actually. He was a smashing guy to chat with. And I said to him halfway through the interview, I said, Elton, can I cast your memory back to Yellow Brick Road and Captain Fantastic? I thought they were two superb albums. Can I ask you two questions about it? Well, one, the fact that you did two shows in the one night at the Apollo, and you played for 2 hours each show. Was incredible where you got the energy from. And he looked at me and he said, I can't remember that. And then he thought, wait a minute. Yes, I do remember that. I fell out with my manager about that. And, he made me do 2 shows in the one night. It was ridiculous. But I do remember it. I remember coming off stage, just putting on a dressing gown, and they rushed me out the side door, and there was a car sitting there waiting. I got into the back seat of the car, and it took me down to the Albany Hotel where I was staying. I was rushed into the lift up to my room and straight into a hot bath. I lay in that hot bath for 15 minutes, got out, had a wee bite to eat, lay in the bed for 15 or 20 minutes, trying to relax. He never mentioned anything about drink or drugs, but I would suspect at that time that they were partook of. And he says, then I got changed, a new outfit on, back downstairs, back into the car, back up to the Apollo, up the side lane, in the stage door, and 20 minutes later I was back on stage again and did the show, the same 2-hour show all over again. And that was a memory. And another, the other slightly interesting, but perhaps for your listeners, was when I said to him, "Can you tell me a little bit more about the actual writing and of Yellow Brick Road and Captain Fantastic? There's some amazing tunes on." I looked at me and he almost had a tear in his eye, and he says, "Tom, I'm really sorry, I can't answer that question." And I said, "What do you mean you can't answer it? It's some of your best ever work, wonderful, wonderful songs that you've got in these two albums." And he says, "I remember absolutely nothing about that whole period in my life. It was drink, it was drugs, it was just any pills, anything that was going. It's a miracle I lived through it. But one of my big regrets is that I remember absolutely nothing about that period." And that was sad.
Oh,
My second story, as I said, the two came in my head at the one time, and I thought I could maybe get away with telling both of them.
Definitely.
Again, I can't remember the year. It was certainly mid-80s. And ZZ Top were playing at the Apollo. It was round about the time when the Eliminator album had come out, and that was full of all the hits, Give Me All Your Lovin' and Sharp Dressed Man. That reminds me, Crownlands, Leadfoot and Spit It Out. That's the two songs I've been playing on the radio on my new show.
Yeah.
So ZZ Top playing the Apollo, and I was lucky enough to get a freebie from the record company, and I had my ticket. And then a couple of weeks before the show, I get a call from another record company to say, "Oh, we've got an artist bringing an album out, and he wants to come up to Glasgow, Tom, to do an interview with you for Radio Clyde. Are you up for it?" And I said, "Of course, yeah, no problem." So it was going to be a pre-recorded interview on the Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah.
So he came into Radio Clyde and we recorded this interview, and it was it was a pleasure to do this interview because the guy in question, he'd been a big star for many, many years, but his management were very, very protective, and he didn't really do interviews. But his band had now split up. Well, the drummer had died, so they called it a day. And he was now solo. You probably know who I'm talking about now.
Yeah.
He'd gone solo, and here he was, wanted to go up to Glasgow to do an interview. So we recorded the interview in the afternoon. We got finished maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock. He was a nice guy. We were getting on fine. He says, "What are you doing tonight?" And I said, "Oh, I'm actually going to a gig. I'm going to the Apollo to see a band." And he said, "Oh, I was going to ask you if you fancied joining me for dinner and maybe a couple of pints." And I said, "Oh, I'd love to, but ZZ Top, I really want to see them at the Apollo." So he says, "Well, could I maybe come?"
Yeah, God.
And I says, "Well, I'll see if I can get you a ticket." So I phones up the record company and I says, "You were good enough to give me a freebie for tonight, a pass. Any chance of a second ticket?" "Oh, Tom, I'm sorry. Absolutely no possibility. We could have sold the 3,500 tickets 10 times over. And I'm getting phone calls every 5 minutes from journalists and BBC people and radio people, journalists all wanting a ticket for this gig. You've got your one ticket, Tom. I'm sorry, that's all we can do." So I said, "Oh, well, okay, I understand, no problem." And I was just about to put the phone up, hang the phone up, and the guy says, "By the way, Tom, who was it for? Was it for your wife or who was it for?" I says, "No, it was actually for Robert Plant, who I've got sitting beside me here." So the guy at Warner Brothers said, Graham, I think his name was, he says, "Robert Plant, the Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin." I says, "Hi." "Oh, hang on a second, Tom, and I'll see what I can do. I'll phone you back in 5 minutes." Right enough, 5 minutes later, "We've got another pass for you, Tom." So Robert was delighted. He was over the moon. Yeah. So again, he was staying at the Albany. So I picked him up at 6:30 or whatever it was, at the Albany, and we went up and we went into the Lauders Bar, right across the road from the Apollo,
Across the road,
next to the Pavilion Theatre. We didn't go into the lounge bar. We went into the the public bar, which was on the right hand side. It was nearer the Pavilion. We went in there, and of course it was absolutely heaving, packed with rock fans who were going to ZZ Top. So we walked in, and nobody knew me. I was just a voice in the radio, so nobody knew me. But Robert Plant, folk were looking and going, "No, it can't be. Robert Plant's just walked into Lauders Bar. Oh, no, it can't be." So I goes up to the bar and buys a couple of pints, and Robert and me are standing, and one or two guys plucked up the courage to come up and say, "Excuse me, are you Robert Plant?" And the man was fine. He's that's me. I'm Robert Plant. And I always remember one wee guy with a wee moustache, and he says, "You could buy me a pint, Robert Plant, because I've bought every album that you've ever recorded. You owe me." So we crosses the road at 8:00. We goes in, and we've got 2 seats, and the 2 seats are right in the front of the circle. Quite often when it was a freebie, you managed that you were in that little, what did they call it, at the side of the circle.
Oh, aye.
Boxes.
Boxes, mate.
Aye, in one of the boxes, it was like a private box. But this time, me and Robert sitting side by side, front of the circle. And it was just amazing. I'm sitting thinking, bloody hell, this is not a bad job I've got. A guy sitting beside Robert Plant watching ZZ Top. The show was fantastic. Now, my memory's a wee bit hazy about this. I'm sure some of the listeners will correct me if I'm wrong. But the show was absolutely terrific. A couple of hours I played. And at the end of the show, the place was going mental for an encore. The band went off the stage and the place was going absolutely mental. And you remember, obviously, that the stage at the Apollo was very high. But then the lighting rig was miles away. It was a really high stage. And as 3,500 people shouting for this encore, a wee guy up in the lighting rig lost his grip, or lost his footing, and he slipped and fell. And 3,500 people went from cheering for an encore to, bloody hell, if that guy falls, he's going to get killed. And he's swinging for this lighting rig for about 20-30 seconds, and finally lets go, and bang, falls down, splatter onto the stage of the Apollo. And everybody just, bloody, he must be dead, because the height that he fell there. And then from the side of the stage, out comes 2 wee guys in white doctor's coats carrying a stretcher. And they put the stretcher down, and they lift the dummy onto the stretcher and take the dummy and the stretcher back off stage. It was actually Billy Gibbons and Dusty Hill from dressed as doctors. So they take the stretcher off and come back on and play the encore. That is a huge memory of mine from the ZZ Top gig.
Yeah. That was a moment that I was there as well, Tom. Never forget it. The whole gig was just unbelievable. Oh, you were there as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Was that the gig where the crowd spotted Robert Plant and started shouting his name?
I thought, yes.
I think it was.
Yes. Have I got it right? The two, Dusty and Billy came on with the stretcher, didn't they?
I can't remember that, but I remember the guy falling off.
I remember the guy falling as well. But hey, the hive mind will tell us, Tom. These guys, this audience is amazing. They know everything about the Apollo. They'll probably tell us the names of the company that supplied the jackets that they were wearing. It's that level of detail.
What colour underpants did Robert Plant have on though?
I don't think he wore any, mate.
We've had moments. we've had moments on here when they've been arguing about electricians, mate. I mean, it is unbelievable. The guys love the place and they remember everything about it. It's quite remarkable. So I've got a couple of questions here that the guys have sent in. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions just off the stuff that folk have sent in? There's one guy who was quite funny. When we put it up, Tom, one guy, Robert Johnson, said, we just said, has anyone got any questions for Tom? And Robert Johnson said, I know the answer to all my questions. Full stop. Don't know what mood he was in. Right, Tommy Weir, Tommy's in. I can see Tommy's here. That's Tommy's nickname is Bon Scott, Tom. So you'll see him coming up in the chat. There's a few questions from Tommy here. He said, who were your musical heroes? And who were your favourites? The bands that got you into rock music, I guess.
I find that so hard to. That's one that I get asked an awful lot, and it's just so hard. It really is hard to answer that. The first record I bought, and this will really show my age, certainly wasn't rock, but it was in the early '60s, and it was a single by the Shadows.
Oh my goodness!
But it was the guitar playing. I think that was the attraction. I don't know what age I would be, 12, 13, something like that. And it was the guitar sound, and that was the first thing that got me into what went on to become rock. Yes. I then started hearing stuff like on the radio. You'd hear the Kinks, some of the early Kinks stuff was very much rock. I had a guy that was working beside. He was a big blues fan, and he was really into like obscure blues stuff, like Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee and stuff like that. And he used to give me a loan of his LPs to take home for a couple of nights. So that got me into blues. And then after the Kinks, there was Hendrix, the Beatles and the Stones, of course. And then gradually, when Zeppelin, there was the Yardbirds. I really loved the Yardbirds. And then Zeppelin came through, and then it was just boom. From then on, it was just never ending. It was fantastic. Yeah, great period of music. It really was.
Actually, one of the other questions we got from Tommy was, what do you think was the best period in the music industry that you were working in the industry? When was the time you enjoyed the most?
I think for me personally, probably the 70s. Right. But I hate being a musical snob. I think even though a lot of the sort of current pop music is shite, I would have to say yes, it's shite to my ears and possibly to you guys. But the people who are teenagers, 12, 13, 14 just now, and getting into that music, they're getting into music, and who am I to say, you shouldn't listen to pop music, you should listen to rock music? I think we're a welcoming family, the rock family, and anyone that wants to join us, great. If you don't have to. If you happen to like country or jazz or classical or dance or whatever, then fair enough.
Absolutely. We actually have that debate quite a lot on here about, if we like the young kids' music, there'll be a problem with the young kids' music because it's not aimed at us. It's not our music.
Yeah, it's not ours. It's theirs.
Chris is just saying here, he wouldn't bet that one person on here would have guessed Elton John's gig was one of your favourite memories. Interesting.
It was just not necessarily one of my favourite memories. I maybe said that, but it was. I wasn't expecting the question. So when Scott said, "What's your favourite memory of Apollo?" The two that just flashed. I mean, I've got hundreds of memories of Apollo, and the Barrowland, and the SEC, and the Playhouse, and all sorts of memories. But it was just the two that just immediately flashed into my mind was the Elton John story and the ZZ Top story. Possibly because they're both in my book.
You did well. That took you 40 minutes before you mentioned the book, Tom. I'm quite impressed.
Can I ask you a question, Tom?
Sure.
When you were at the Kiss gig in the 80s, and I think it was Kiss, and they said, we'd like to say a big mention to Tom Russell, and you were in a box, I think.
No, I was in the circle.
Everyone, in the circle, and everyone did everyone turn around and look at you?
Not really.
And did you not feel a wee bit? I was thinking that would be quite weird if the guy on the stage, Paul Stanley, says, like to thank Tom Russell, and then you're just sitting there going, "Oh, that's me they're talking about." That would be so weird. How do you feel then?
It was weird, yes. It was wonderful. And again, it was similar to what I was saying earlier on, sitting there with Robert Plant watching a gig. And I think, bloody hell, how lucky am I? Paul and Jean, I think it was, had come in the afternoon to Radio Clyde, and we recorded an interview. And I think it was probably the first time I had interviewed them, and we got on well. They were charming. They were very professional. I did my best to make it a decent interview, and they said, "Are you coming to the show tonight?" And I said, "Yes, I've got 2 tickets. I'm coming with my missus." And they said, "Oh, great. Hopefully you'll enjoy the show, and maybe if you want to come back stage afterwards for a wee drink." So I was, delighted. And then we're sitting there, and we're right in the front of the circle for that show. I think it was the front row of the circle. And when Paul said that, it was like, what's the old say? I got a big ready.
Oh,
my face went red with embarrassment, but it was lovely. It was really nice. I would lie if I didn't say that. But not many people sitting around about us knew who I was, because remember, I was a guy that was doing a show once a week on Radio Clyde.
Yeah,
Right.
People who were rock fans, some of them used to listen to me, I'm delighted to say. But my face wasn't particularly well known at that time.
Right.
there was.
I've got another question for you, Tom.
All right, okay.
Did you ever have when you were a bit younger, did you have similar hairline? And you've got a similar hairline to mine now, but did you ever have long hair as well?
Not terribly long. Yes, but sort of just below the ear.
All right. Okay.
But I started going bald quite early, in my early 20s. And by my late 20s, I was really quite bald on top, and it bothered me for a number of years. I was quite self-conscious about it. Don't give a toss about it now, but at that time I was.
It's just because one time when I was outside the Apollo after a gig, I saw this guy with a hair like ours now, but he had really long hair, and I could only see the back of him. And this guy, one of my mates, said, "That's Tom Russell. Look, it's the bald head." And I was like, "Tom Russell? I don't understand why." Because you were walking out, and I didn't see your face, and I was going, "Is that what his hair's like? Is that Tom Russell's hair?" I can't believe that. I thought you'd have long hair, like long hair on the top. Yeah. I just remember.
No, it was just maybe short at the back, maybe collar length. It was never. There was never enough of it really to grow it long.
I remember the first time I saw you, Tom. It was at the Kelvin Grove Festival. You were comparing. I'm sure you remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And you walked out, and there's a lot of us had never seen you, because back in those days, of course, people forget that you didn't really see people, did you? Unless they were on telly or newspapers, you wouldn't know what people looked like. So it was like, "Oh, there's Tom." Yeah, who was that? Andy? That was Glasgow that year, wasn't it? I think it was Glasgow. Yeah, it was good. Yeah. So, another. I've got a hello for you actually, Kevin Scott.
Oh yes, hi Kevin.
A long-term friend. And what he says, quite sweet. He said, "Tom might not know this, but Tom has been an inspiration, even if he doesn't know it."
Oh, that's lovely.
Isn't that nice?
Thanks, Kevin.
That's lovely.
The way I view it, Scott, is see, back in the 60s,
yeah,
you used to and probably in the 70s as well, you used to get a little box of singles. So you'd buy your singles because you couldn't afford an album. You'd have a few singles. And when you're 14, 15, something like that, you would go along to a mate's house and you would take your little box of singles. And he would have a wee record player. And you'd want to impress him with the singles that you had. And he wanted to impress you with the singles that he had. But basically, you were just, you were, what's the...
Showing off.
No, that's no. I forgot what the question was.
You go around to your mate's house for the singles.
Inspiration.
He was saying about being an inspiration. Yeah. I've always viewed it as just like that back in the 60s when I was taking my wee box of singles and going around to a mate's house. That I'd be excited that, wow, I've heard this brand new band.
Yep.
And like you were saying earlier about Crownlands, Scott, you're excited. You found a new band and you want to share it with people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very lucky and very fortunate in the 80s and 90s, and indeed even now on the Max, the new radio station I'm on. I just feel I'm very fortunate that I can, rather than my wee box of singles and sharing with 2 or 3 people in a bedroom, I've got the opportunity to share these, and I'll say, right, there's a song from the first Led Zeppelin album. Maybe you've not heard it before if you're younger, or maybe you haven't heard it for years. And then I would say, here's another song I'm going to play for you. This is a brand new band that I've just come across their very first single, and give it a wee listen, see what you think.
Yeah. I mean, we frequently talk about how you introduced us to Bon Jovi and various other bands, we'd never heard of, and certainly didn't know what they looked like. When I first heard about Aerosmith from you, actually, and Cry of Love. There's a band Andy and I love. You remember Cry of Love back in the day?
Oh yeah, I do. Oh, what was that song called?
Peace
What was
Pipe?
the single?
Peace Pipe.
That's it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I was just singing it yesterday.
Excellent, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And
I'll dig that out and play it.
I've got a question for you, Tom. Another question. Sorry. See when I wrote it down. See when you not lost your show, but when was it Matt? Real Radio cut your show, and then there was a sort of campaign for you to bring back your show. How did that sort of support feel from the public? How did you feel about that?
I was humbled. I'd had 20 odd years on Radio Clyde doing the Friday Rock Show, and then one day the new head of music came in and decided I can still hear his words. I'll not say his name, but it was, Tom, I've been listening to this show that you're doing on a Friday night, and I know you've been doing it for a long time, but I think it's time we stop playing all these obscure bands that you're playing that nobody's ever heard of, and you're playing them and you're getting all excited about them, and nobody's ever heard of them, and nobody will ever hear of them ever again. So I'm afraid we're going to, and I interrupted him and I said, sorry, could you give me examples of these bands that nobody's ever heard of, that are totally obscure? And he said, yes, I've jotted some down here. This is Guns and Roses. I heard you play the other night. Just a racket. Who's this? Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi. They've had three singles, but this time next year they'll be forgotten. And he's Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, yesterday's bands, and this was his attitude. And he said, "So I can offer you 2 things, Tom. I can either give you a show, move you to a Sunday evening, and totally different type of show, and each week you will have to submit your playlist for me to okay. And I don't want any of this, what's something maiden? I don't want any of that. It's just a noise, just a noise. I don't want you playing any of that. I want Steely Dan. I want the Doobie Brothers. I want the Eagles. I want Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell and stuff like that.
Wow.
So I argued for half an hour, but was getting nowhere. It was just, typical a suit.
Yeah.
And I thought, right, my record shops by this time were, the days of small record shops had already, the downward trend had already started. So I was not doing particularly well financially. And my 15 or 20 quid a week doing my show was going to be missed, and I think, Christ, I'm going to struggle to pay my mortgage now. So, to my eternal shame, I said, "Aye, okay, I'll just do that." It was either that or walk out the door.
Right.
So I did it for I think maybe a year, and didn't enjoy it, but it kept the wolf away from the door. And then the phone went out the blue, and it was a guy called Jay Crawford. He worked at Real Radio, was the boss at Real Radio, and he phoned me up and basically said, "We're launching a new radio station in Glasgow. It's going to be called 96.3 Rock Radio. Would like you to come on board and be on 5-6 days a week."
Wow.
And I said, "Well, what we're going to be playing?" And he said, "All the stuff that you've been playing for the past 20 odd years on Radio Clyde. Everything from AC/DC to The Who to Iron Maiden, Guns N' Roses, blah, blah, blah." So I said, to my eternal shame, I didn't say how much. I just said, "Yes, please. When do I start?"
Brilliant.
So I was with Rock Radio for whatever it was, 7, 8, 9 years. And then it was a pity. The Guardian newspaper, who owned Rock and Real and Smooth, they had plans for having a rock radio in all the big cities: Glasgow, Manchester, Newcastle, Birmingham, London, etc. But in 2008, you'll remember the big financial crash.
Yes.
And all the plans were shelved, and then the usual, a new boss came in, and new bosses didn't agree with that idea. They thought, so they changed it to Real Access, and that was, it was the steady downward spiral. And then they were going to change it to, or they were going to close it down. So some of the local people in the Glasgow area put a little campaign up, and as I say, I was humbled, I was honoured. It didn't make any difference. It still closed the bloody station down, but it was nice, and I've got a T-shirt there they gave me. Save Tom's Show, I think it says on it, which was great. The good news. The great news is that I'm now on this new radio station, which, if you'll allow me a shameless plug,
of course,
plug away.
It's called the Max, MAX, based in Glasgow. You can get it on DAB in Glasgow, but it's also online. But the other way people are listening to the radio now, very much so, is on the smartphones via the TuneIn app, and also on Alexa. So you can get us all over the world, I think, on online. But you can get us all over the UK on Alexa and just say "Play Max Scotland." And online it's www.maxradio.co.uk. And I'm on every Friday, Saturday and Sunday night. Tonight's show, because of you guys, I recorded tonight's show. which was a wee bit of pleasure for her indoors, because I had my tea and didn't dash off to do my show.
Oh, that's good.
So,
but I think
I was going to say, like, your book, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I mean, I got it personally signed by you, Tom.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it was a great book. I loved it. It was really good. And where I'm gonna cue you for a plug here. Where do you get that book, Tom?
It's available in all good bookstores still. If the bookshop doesn't have it, they can order it from the wholesale. It's also available through Amazon. It's also on Kindle.
Oh,
yes.
And or you can order it direct from the publisher. You go to I think it's tomrussellrocks.com. And you can just order it direct from the publisher. If you want it autographed, you just put a wee note in, and they get me to autograph them and send them out. And remarkably, it's still selling. When I sat down with the guy that helped me put it together, I just assumed that people would only want to hear the rock stories, the stories about the Apollo and about the Radio Clyde Rock Show, and partying with Ozzy and all that sort of stuff. But Paul said, no, let's go straight back to the beginning. It would be nice to hear the stuff about you that other people that we don't know. And I resisted that for quite a while. I thought, no, who wants to know my grandkids' names? Who wants to know the name of my first dog or where I was brought up? But Paul said, no, honestly, Tom, trust me. So we went right in, and it's not. Yes, the majority of it is about my radio career and stuff. But this, I think I'm right in saying there's a few amusing wee stories that have happened to me over the years in there as well. And people that I've spoken to have in general have said they've enjoyed it, which I'm happy about.
One of our regular tune guys, Chris Welsh, has said you should do an audiobook with that voice, Tom.
Well, do you know that we talked about that, but the publisher said the amount of work to do an audiobook. I mean, when you think it's I can't remember how many pages it is, 800 pages or something. There's hours and hours and hours and hours of audio.
Yes.
So studio time, manufacturing time, cost, and all the rest of it. Yeah. And his idea, he reckoned that you're probably talking 300 or 400 sales at the most, Tom. It just commercially, it just didn't make sense.
Yeah, but that was back then, Tom. Now, audible,
And now that we've had a plug on apollomemories.com.
Oh, well.
Well,
watch the sales skyrocket.
Well, I know the guys on here absolutely love it, and I guess you would do quite well out of that if you did it. We'd love it. I think I'd love a copy of that if you ever did it, Tom. I'd love it. Yeah. So, we've come to the end. We've got one more thing that we do every week, Tom, that we'll do, and that is we're going to play some music from the Apollo, and you're welcome to stay with us if you want to stay. But of course, you're good ladies enjoying your company, so we would understand if you wanted to disappear. But before I play it, Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure for me and Andy and for everybody. I mean, you can see the comments are flooding in. The guys are loving it. So thanks, mate. It's absolutely fantastic you came on the show. We really appreciate it. And I reckon
I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thoroughly enjoyed it, Scott. And I must apologise for going off on tangents and talking about. I've just realised that I've been on for half an hour, whatever it is, and I've been off rambling on talking about this, that, and the other. I haven't talked too much about the Apollo, which is what I'm on for.
Well, since you've let us down like that, Tom, you need to come back on again sometime and just talk about the Apollo. Never miss a trick.
I set myself up. I set myself up for that one, Scott, didn't I?
You did, mate. You did. You well did. You very did. Very much did. So, folks, I'm sure you enjoyed that, and please stick your comments in the Facebook group, and I'm sure. Well, I know Tom looks at it, so you can get some more feedback. But I don't know what they're going to say, Tom. Absolutely fantastic. So, what we do at this point now is we normally play a piece of music, and we regularly give this guy a plug because he's an absolute superstar. Jack McCafferty and his mates have been running Rescued Recordings now for quite a long time. I think I saw, was it 8 years, Andy? Did you see that in the... I think it was 8 years. Jack, if you're there, mate, let us know. But Jack's recordings are a fantastic source for everybody that went to the Apollo. And we're not going to do who played this week because we had the wonderful Tom on. But what we are going to do is we're going to play one of the bands that played this week. And one of the bands that, well, I think it goes without saying they're one of the greatest rock and roll bands of all time. And this is Thin Lizzy from the Glasgow Apollo. Oh,
Scott, can I just interrupt just for a second, just in case I forget? By an amazing coincidence, someone got in touch with me just the other day through, I think, Facebook or Twitter or something, to say that his father had passed away and had left him a cassette of some demos of a particular band. Right. And he was just going to throw it out, and then he thought maybe I could get it digitized and do something with it. Mm-hmm. And I should have just said, no, I'm sorry, I've got enough on my plate. But I said, aye, fine. Gave him my address, and he posted it to me, and it arrived. And it's a cassette of Chow Parrot.
Oh, right.
Parrot. So please, if Jack is listening, if he wants this Chow Parrot cassette to digitize and make available to people, then just get in touch and I'll pass it on to him.
Oh, fantastic. They have come up a few times on the show, Tom, believe it or not. They've come up quite often on the show because they were a support act at the Apollo, as you probably remember. So they do get mentioned. So that's great.
And they played Kelvin Grove as well.
Aye, that's where I remember.
Booed off at Kelvin Grove.
I remember that. But, some bands that get booed off are actually quite good. There's a lot of them have good bands. So
yeah.
Anyway, so thanks, mate.
Can I tell you another quick one?
If you want, mate. I'm not going to chuck you off.
Keep going.
It just came into my head there. Early 80s, I think it would be. In my record shop one day, and sales rep, Matt, his name was, came in 3 o'clock and sold me his new releases. And after a while, he says, "What are you doing tonight, Tom?" And I said, "Nothing. I'm just going up the road." And he said, "Oh, I've got 2 tickets for a gig at the Apollo. I don't know. Do you want to come?" And I said, "Sure. Who's on?" He says, "Well, it's Lindisfarne and the support act." Well, I'll tell you who the support act was in a second. And I said, "Oh, Lindisfarne. When I lived in Newcastle, I went to see them 2 or 3 times. I'd love to see them again play at the Apollo." So Matt and I, the shop shut at 5:30, and then we went. And Matt says, "We're meeting up with a guy that's the support act in Burnsouth for just a quick pint before the gig." So we went to Burnsouth, went in at the bar, met this guy who was doing a solo turn as support to Lindisfarne. And it was just one of these magical hours. You know how it sometimes happens.
Yeah.
You go, you're not expecting it, and you have a pint, and you have another pint, and you have a wee half, and another pint, and another wee half. And before the 3 of us were blittered. 7:10, the big guy looks at his watch and says, "Bloody hell, I'm supposed to be on stage in 10 minutes supporting Lindisfarne." So the 3 of us ran up Renfield Street, and he went down and went in the stage door, and Matt and I went in with our tickets and went in, and there was maybe 100 people there to watch the support act. It filled up a bit for Lindisfarne, obviously, but for the support act, there was maybe 100 people. So this guy comes on the stage, and he was wobbling a bit because he certainly knocked him back.
Well refreshed.
And well refreshed.
Yeah.
And me and Matt sat there and watched his show, and he was good. He was once he started singing and playing, he was good. And the 100 people got to maybe 150 by the time his set finished, and he was getting warmer and warmer applause at the end of each song because he was good. You could see the guy had talent. And the last song he did, I've no idea what it was, but it was quite an up number, and he got a huge cheer from the 150 people, and he was that pleased. He put his guitar down and jumped off the stage.
Oh my God!
Oh, no.
You may remember the Apollo stage was rather high.
Yes.
The poor bugger broke his ankle.
Oh no!
It was carted off. I don't know whether it was broken or I'm saying he broke his ankle. It might have been sprained, but he certainly did in his ankle. So that was the one and only time that I'd ever met this guy, was that night when he was supporting Lindisfarne. 10 years later, he'd become a star, a big star. He'd some hit singles, some big selling albums, and I get invited. I used to sometimes, when nobody else at Radio Clyde could do an interview, even though it wasn't particularly suitable for my rock show, Clyde would ask me if I could go down and do the interview, and then they can use the interview on other shows. And I would do it just for a wee trip out, you know. I would get flown down to Heathrow, and I'd get picked up by a car and taken to do an interview, then come back again. It was a smashing wee day out. So this day I get flown down, picked up, taken to this posh hotel in Chelsea, and I get taken in to see this guy and do an interview. And I walks in, and I remember this Lindisfarne story, and I walked in thinking, I wonder if he'll remember me. I walked in with my tape recorder, and the introductions were done. Oh, this is Tom Russell from Radio Clyde in Glasgow. And he looked up and he says, "You're the bastard that got me pissed in Glasgow and I broke my ankle when I jumped off that stage." It was Chris Rea.
Oh, was it?
It was. So there you are. I managed to get another Apollo story.
Good man. I have never heard that. Never heard that. That's not one that's come up. I don't ever remember that coming up at all, mate. Thank you very much. Right. So, brilliant. I must say that I need to apologise to some of the guys that have been watching, because I'm sorry we can't get to all the questions. There's just no way we can do it. You're going to have to come back. It would be rude if you don't come back, Tom. Right. So we're going to finish with one of the bands that Andy and I love and everybody loves, and it's one of their anniversaries tonight, and this is one of Jack's rescued recordings. By the way, Tom, we're not allowed to call them bootlegs. We've got to call them rescued recordings. All right, it's a law on here. It's a law. Or Jack will come and get you. So this is the one and only Thin Lizzy, which both Andy and I were at this gig. So it's one of the greatest gigs we were ever at. I love this. And Tom, if you leave during this, that's fine. If not, we have a little bit at the end as well if another story comes to your head. So it's only 5 minutes long, mate. Is that safe to put it on now? You got another story to tell?
I'll tell it after the song.
Oh, you're a good man. Thank you.
See
Wow.
I love Thin Lizzy.
What a band. What a band, man. Did that bring back some memories, Tom?
That to me was a perfect example of where over the years record companies went wrong with so many of the live albums they would release. They would take the tapes of a live recording, and they would listen and say, "Oh, wait a minute, the drummer was slightly out of time there for half a second, or the rhythm guitarist played a slightly bum note, or you know," and they would hone it and hone it and hone it and perfect it, and then they'd say, "Oh well, the audience doesn't sound right. Let's input," and they would bring in some cheering from somewhere, and by the time the album came out, there's many live albums. It's not even live. They've re-recorded the songs in the studio. But listening to that there was a perfect example of how a rescued recording, which is how it actually was on the night. And that was absolutely fantastic. I was sitting here with a tear in my eye listening to that. That was perfect. The Apollo choir in the background there, and that was just terrific. Radio Clyde, back in the 80s, they were making so much money, they bought a mobile recording studio off the Rolling Stones. It was a second hand when Rolling Stones had bought a new one, so they sold their old one to Radio Clyde, and it was state of the art. And they used it, I think, twice a year. They used it to record the bands at Kelvin Grove, and they used it in December to record the Christmas Carols concert. And Alex Dixon, who was the boss at the time, he was a strange guy, but I got on really well with Alex. And I remember saying to Alex, "Listen, why don't we use this mobile a bit more often, like all year round? We could record some of the bands that are playing at the Apollo and the Barrowland and various other places, and broadcast them on air." And Alex says, "Well, do you think it would work?" We could try. So we asked a couple of the record companies. There was a couple of bands coming up, and we said to the record companies, and of course the record companies were, don't think we could do that. It'd be unauthorized. Blah blah blah. So we said, right, okay. The deal is, you let us record it. After we've recorded it, we'll give you the tapes. Mm-hmm. You take the tapes away once they've been mixed and everything. And in the contract, it says it will not be broadcast on air until you have okayed it. If you don't like what we've done with it, fine, we dump the tape. And 99 times out of 100, when we did it and the record companies listened to it and the bands listened to it, they were delighted. So we broadcast it. I don't think that was a Radio Clyde one, but I think there was a couple of Thin Lizzy concerts we recorded with that mobile. And it just sounds so real when they don't overdub and they cover up on mistakes and things, leave the mistakes in. That's what it was like on the night.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the analog world has many criticisms, but certainly in terms of music, I don't think the digital stuff touches it. A lot of the remastered albums I don't like because they've got, there's a famous Stones album where you hear them shouting at each other. There's a Beatles album as well. You can hear the band talking to each other in the background. They take it all out, and it's like washing out the atmosphere. And it's the same with these live recordings. Wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Thanks, Tom. You've probably seen some of the comments. This show gets recorded, Tom. So if you ever wanted to watch it back, you'll be able to read them because they go on the screen for everybody. But absolutely fantastic. Thank you ever so much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure having you on. Thank you.
I've just seen a little message.
Oh.
I've seen a message there coming up from George. Yep. Where are the original tapes? Well, after that, they all went up into the loft at Radio Clyde.
Right.
A big floored loft. And there was probably hundreds of them by the time they stopped doing it. And they were all up there, and there was a Edinburgh-based record company called River Records, I think it was called, and they approached Radio Clyde and said, could they release some of the material on their label? And some deal was done, and I think there was maybe about a dozen of the recordings came out on River Records, but there's still hundreds were lying up there. So probably 10, 12, 15 years ago, something like that, Radio Clyde was bought over by a German company called Bauer. And, of course, the German people came in and having a look at what they'd bought and, what's this room and what's that? And what's up the stair there? Oh, that's the loft. Oh, let's have a look. What's all these tapes? Oh, well, that's tapes of, bands that have played the Apollo and the Barrowland over the years, and he rhymed off some of the names. And the Germans said, well, and what are they lying here for? They're a fire risk.
No.
Skip them. And a couple of the guys that were still there, John McCalman, who used to be the festival director for Kelvin Grove, he said, oh, please, Mr. German man, please don't throw these out. These are priceless. Why throw them out? We can do something with them. But the Germans basically said, no, skip now.
No.
So they were dumped. That was after I had left Clyde, by the way. It was maybe 12, 15 years ago.
Jesus.
Isn't it sad?
That is cultural.
But there's lots of them. There's lots of them I see on your site, and it must be Jack that's putting them up. There's lots of them have surfaced, so you can't hear them.
Yeah.
There's a. I mean that question's been asked so often, and you've just given the wrong answer, Tom. The wrong answer. We were all hoping you had them in your garage or something. Dear me.
I've kept lots of my interviews in the garage, in my loft, and I've started releasing or broadcasting them. As I mentioned earlier, this new radio station I'm on is the Max, but it's more than just a radio station. They built a web platform, and there's videos and there's videos of sessions and videos of interviews and all sorts of things at maxradio.co.uk, or the main platform is myplayer.uk. And some of the stuff on there already is quite fantastic. But I'm starting to now and again bring in, for example, when Eddie Van Halen died, I thought, I've got an interview somewhere with Eddie. So I found it on Reel to Reel, and I took it in, and we managed to get it onto a computer, and we broadcast the Eddie Van Halen interview. I also found a 1980s interview with Neil Peart from Rush that I'd recorded at Ingleson.
I was there.
Put that out. So, dreadful venue. Dreadful venue.
A terrible place, wasn't it?
The only good thing about it was you could get parked.
That's the only time I ever fainted at a gig, Tom. I ended up getting pulled out the front because there was so much movement in the crowd. that we all got
Right.
crushed, and I was in an oxygen tent watching Neil Peart. It was quite bizarre, But
Well,
okay, right. We need to.
right, I'm away to
bring
get
this to an end.
my supper.
You're a star. Everyone else, we're going to have our after show Zoom. Tom, if you wanted to join us, you can join us. I can send you the link if you wanted to hear the rabble that come on afterwards. I'm sure it's a bit late, but if you wanted to, you've been more than welcome. But from everybody on here, Tom,
I better go down and see what her indoors wanting.
I imagine that's right. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you ever so much, and we do hope we see you again on here. It'd be great. It'd be great to see you on there. And there's a good summary of what one of the Facebook guys said. Who are you going to shoot with Zach Guns? The Germans. Yes, that German said a skip. Yeah. So thanks very much to me and Andy and from all our viewers. It's very much appreciated, Tom. Cheers. Good night. See you later, mate.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, how do we follow that, folks? I think the answer is we don't. So tonight has been an amazing show, and we're very grateful to Tom. How do you feel about that, mate?
That was Tom Russell.
That was Tom Russell. Exactly, that was Tom Russell.
Brilliant.
We used to write to Tom every week. We did it for bloody years, and you know the man nearly every week he read our letters out. It was like forming a musical bond between people. It was incredible. So I'm very, very good. And I remember one time I wrote to him and I said I was a big Aussie fan, and the next week what arrives a beer mat that Tom had got Aussie, to Scott from Ozzy Osbourne. Absolutely. I didn't ask for it. He just sent me it. No, he just sent me it. I've got it framed downstairs, mate. Next time you're here, you can have a look. It's brilliant. So, any last words tonight, mate? Are we going to go and get ready for the Zoom call, I think?
No. I'm sort of a bit tired now after listening to Tom.
Yeah.
I'm not tired. I mean, I'm a bit drained because it's such an honour to see the man.
Too right. Absolutely right.
He formed like you and me. He formed part of our musical education. As
absolutely. Boys. No way would I've been to 2,000 concerts if it hadn't been for Tom Russell. Anyway, that's been a blast. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Just before we go, thanks for the support on the new shop. Look at these two characters. We've got Jim and we've got Caroline there showing off their new t-shirts. Really appreciate it. That's been amazing as well. How many have we sold? 30 odd.
Oh, yep, about 30.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Brilliant.
I've got some ideas about customization of these things, possibly.
Caroline suggested that, didn't she? Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah,
good idea.
But it'll take a wee bit of time to get my brain around it and see if I can do it.
So by 2025, we'll have customizable t-shirts.
Hey, come on now.
Anyway,
good night.
Good night, and we'll see you on the after show Zoom. How are we going to follow that show up, mate? How on earth are we going to follow that one up? Oh God.
Well.